Published, 1:52 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, the 9th of May 2018. Updated, 4:38 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, the 9th of May 2018. These stunning images released in color to mark the 73rd anniversary of V-Day show the jubilation of celebrating crowds in the closing stages of World War II. Britons are pictured waving Union flags in the street after Allied forces secured victory in Europe over Hitler's Nazis in 1945. Separate pictures show triumphant US GIs being transported back to New York Harbour aboard the heavily crowded Queen Elizabeth after V-Day. Winston Churchill is also shown waving from a balcony in Buckingham Palace alongside King George VI, the monarch's wife, and their daughters Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret. Stunning images released in color to mark the 73rd anniversary of V-Day show scenes of jubilation towards the end of World War II. In one photo, Winston Churchill, Centre, is shown waving from a balcony in Buckingham Palace alongside King George VI, second from right, the monarch's wife, second from left, and their daughters Princess Elizabeth, left, and Princess Margaret, right. On V-Day, while there were celebrations across Europe, crowds also spilled out onto the streets in Moscow as Russian soldiers returned triumphant after Hitler's defeat. Servicemen are pictured being greeted by jubilant crowds at the city's Belorusky railway station in 1945. Huge crowds piled onto the streets after the Nazi surrender and waved US and British flags. The German surrender had been anticipated for some days, but when the news was confirmed, it created waves of celebrations across Western Europe. Coming home. Separate pictures show triumphant U.S. troops being transported back to New York Harbor aboard the heavily crowded Queen Elizabeth after V-Day. So many troops crammed onto the ship's deck that it was standing room only as they waved to crowds on the shore. Soldiers of America's 28th Infantry Division are pictured parading down the Champs-Élysées and under the famous Arc de Triomphe in Paris on August 29, 1944. It was the first U.S. division to enter the French capital after its liberation, having been ruled by Nazi Germany since June 1940. Photos brought to life with color also show Russian troops returning to Moscow and being welcomed with open arms by civilians. The scenes of joy compare dramatically with that of a German battalion tank set alight by American troops in the city of Leipzig. The photos were colorized by electrician Royston Leonard, 55, from Cardiff, who spent between 3 and 4 hours colorizing each picture. Soldiers of the 70th Division of the American 7th Army hold up a Nazi flag and a portrait of Hitler outside a cafe as they celebrate victory over the German dictator's forces. British troops cheering and waving their arms in jubilation from behind the barbed wire fence of Nazi prisoner of war camp Stalag 11B near Falling Basel in the German state of Lower Saxony, the first POW camp to be liberated on April 16, 1945. A photo taken on May 2, 1945 in Berlin, Germany and now transformed with color shows a Soviet soldier raising the red flag over the Reichstag. After the Allied forces entered the city, a young boy called Leslie plants a Union flag into a pile of rubble and debris after his home was destroyed following a Nazi bombing raid on London in 1940. This scene was typical of the defiance showed by Britons in the face of relentless Luftwaffe airstrikes. On unconditional surrender was signed and then approved by the Allied forces on May 7, 1945. All German forces were ordered to cease operations once and for all at 10 a.m. the following day. German surrender had been anticipated for some days, but when the news was confirmed, it created waves of celebrations across Western Europe. Winston Churchill made a now famous radio broadcast at 3 p.m. on V-Day in which he announced the ceasefire. GIs of the 413th Infantry Regiment, 104th Infantry Division, Timberwolf Division, were pictured resting on railway tracks after combat in Düren, town in North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany on December 21, 1944. The photo was captured during the Battle of the Bulge, the last major German offensive campaign on the Western Front during the Second World War. 4 members of the military police take a break along a German road to read in the Stars and Stripes newspaper about the Nazi surrender in May 1945. The front page carried the headline, "Nazis quit, a tank burns at the intersection of Karl-Heinz Street and Zieskochurch Street in the eastern German city of Leipzig in April 1945. The body is covered by a blanket inches from the tracks of the war machine." Weeks after the picture was taken, Europe celebrated victory over the Nazis in a wave of euphoria. The scenes of jubilation were a far cry from the early days of the Second World War, when Nazi Germany made crushing advances across Europe. Pictured as a German Heinkel He 111 on a mission above neighboring Poland in 1939, a German officer marches during the failed Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. The photos were colorized by electrician Royston Leonard, 55, from Cardiff, who spent between 3 and 4 hours colorizing each picture.